And what complicates the situation in Pokrovsk the most, aside from the fact that the enemy forces still outnumber us in manpower? How do you assess the situation? What is happening there right now?
You know, there is so much information and it ranges from positive to negative. From everything is lost to we're counterattacking and winning. So there isn't really a complete picture there right now. It's impossible to form a clear picture for yourself, just as it's impossible to make any confident predictions about what will happen next. Whether we will hold Pokrovsk or retreat from there is still uncertain. It's simply not possible to draw such conclusions right now. For now, we can generally state that, yes, you are right, a counter-sabotage operation is underway, which has two objectives. The first is to clear the city of small enemy infantry groups that have infiltrated there and are trying to accumulate and spread throughout the urban area. And the second important task is to unblock logistics. Above all, in this regard, we should pay attention to the former Dobropilia salient. Out of habit, I call it the Dobropilia salient, though there's almost nothing left of it now, but it's just for convenience. That is, to the north, it's the area of Rodinske and Krasny Lyman. This is where the main events are about to unfold, which could affect the situation both in Pokrovsk itself and in the logistical support for the troops currently holding the defense there. Will it be possible to fully restore logistics? Well, then we can talk about the first good result. If not, well, then it won't work out. War is such a phenomenon where nothing can be guaranteed. Here's the situation. That is, there are positions of our forces in the city, and there are enemy positions in the city as well. Right now, there are a lot of reports saying that Pokrovsk is almost lost, and that troops need to be withdrawn from there. There are messages of a more reassuring nature. They draw various maps where they say that 80% of the city is under enemy control, 85% of the city is under enemy control. They draw red zones. But all this, unfortunately, cannot be perceived as a constant. Why? Because now a group of Russian army infantry has occupied some important point. An hour later, they were driven out, but they still managed to draw a red spot, that is, to color this area red. Then they have to redraw it. So it's this kind of unstable situation that doesn't allow anyone to say that the city is under someone's control. It's a large gray zone, a zone of fighting. That's why I would suggest waiting for some kind of result, at least an interim one, so that we can make any confident conclusions based on it.
Regarding the fact that yesterday in Pokrovsk, additional forces from Timur's special unit broke through a land corridor to the GOR special forces, who the day before, after a successful airborne operation, took up new positions. This was reported by the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. The agency emphasized that fierce fighting is taking place in one of the districts of Pokrovsk with the Russian occupiers. And the main task of the defense forces is to prevent the Russian army from disrupting the supply of Ukrainian units, which is exactly what you just mentioned. Well, if we take into account the balance of forces and resources, considering that, according to various estimates, up to 170,000 Russian occupiers are involved in the Pokrovsk-Mirnograd operation on one side. How do you assess what forces and resources are being brought in there? We see, according to various reports, that there is also very active use of drones operated by brave Ukrainian defenders.
In the city itself, there were several hundred enemy servicemen, with estimates up to 350. But now we clearly understand that all of this can change over time. That is, some are being brought in, some are being eliminated. Unfortunately, for now, the enemy still has the ability to bring their infantry groups into the city, primarily from positions in the south and southwest, from where they entered. Therefore, obviously, there is a certain rotation of enemy forces there, if I can put it that way. Mainly, as you correctly said, up to 170,000 live in that direction. Enemy forces are concentrated in that direction, I emphasize, by no means in the city itself. So, I just mentioned the approximate number that the enemy can concentrate in the city of Pokrovsk itself. And directly near Pokrovsk, around Pokrovsk itself, along the perimeter of the Pokrovsk mineral agglomeration, the estimates were 27,000, and recently they brought in another 11,000 as reinforcements. I will not disclose the number of our forces. You
understand why, don't you? On other fronts, we see that the attacks are less intense there. We understand that more effort is currently being directed at the Pokrovsk direction, at Pokrovsk itself, since there are certain deadlines that, as we can see, the enemy is not meeting. Given the situation on other fronts, what can be added here, and is it important? Is the change in weather conditions important?
Of course, it's important. Changes in weather conditions play a very significant role. They affect both logistics and the use of drones. For example, it's much harder to use drones when there's fog, and fog is a common occurrence at this time of year. When it's foggy, it's harder to use drones, and as a result, we lose some of our ability to destroy enemy equipment, and the enemy in turn tries to rely more on armor, hoping that drones will be less effective and operate less. That's just one example. And in general, when there's mud, slush, and thaw moving across the fields, if the fighting is happening in the fields, let's digress from the cover a bit, because the front line often runs through fields, becomes much more difficult. When there's slush, snow, and soon the snow will start falling, obviously the weather definitely plays its part. In other sectors of the front, the situation is such that we can read about the fighting near Kupiansk. There were reports from President Volodymyr Zelensky about Kupiansk. He spoke about deadlines being set and plans being made to clear out the occupiers who are currently in Kupiansk. He mentioned a figure of up to 60 people. As for the southern section of the front, there was also information about combat operations in the southern part of the Zaporizhia and Kherson regions. But compared to Pokrovsk, it can be said that the fighting there is of low intensity. In other words, everything is concentrated right now. The focus of operations is on the Pokrovsk sector of the front.
And in fact, that's why they're even using artificial intelligence. Here, I don't know, your comment, how effective are these methods in the context of trying to make it seem like supposedly large numbers of Ukrainian soldiers are surrendering?
Oh, you mean the various videos that are being broadcast?
Yes.
They're producing them. This is propaganda work aimed at sowing panic among the population. We both understand perfectly well that, for the most part, people won't bother to figure out whether it's artificial intelligence or actual, so to speak, real footage. All of this is targeted at the masses who won't look into it. So a person will watch something like this and take it as the truth. They'll start posting on social media, they'll go out and tell their friends and neighbors about it, and that's how panic spreads by word of mouth. That's exactly what the opponents are counting on. So what we need to do here is simply tell the public more about how to distinguish fakes from real footage videos and how to filter information.
How much does this affect our Western partners, considering that one of the intentions is also to show just how dire the situation supposedly is at the front, and to suggest that it's not worth helping Ukraine with weapons? Or could it just end up as yet another TikTok video that people scroll past and move on from? Do they have any significance at all?
Well, we saw that invitations were sent out to foreign journalists so that they would come to the area of the supposed encirclement of Ukrainian troops near Pokrovsk in Kutenka. Supposedly, let me emphasize, there is no encirclement there. I want to stress that once again. We saw the reaction, or rather the lack of any reaction. In other words, everyone understood it correctly. No one responded to this offer. But we're talking about journalists who can distinguish truth from lies. So this is an example of that kind of influence, attempts at influence. That is, the enemy is trying in the same way, with such information dumps and provocations, to influence our partners so that they, according to Russia's plan, would come to the conclusion that we supposedly, any kind of assistance is pointless, that Russia is advancing and winning anyway. That's what this is aimed at. And here too, we need to do separate work on our side to show that all of this is fake and none of it should be believed. Why? Because the average person in the West isn't going to look into it either. That is, there are people there who can tell the wheat from the chaff, and there are ordinary people who won't bother to figure it out. And in this way, negative public opinion can be formed. And that's why we need to conduct counter-propaganda.
Which in fact is what we do from time to time. This is Denis Popovich with you. Let me remind our viewers, we are military observers.